So, my name is Annette Belknap, and I am going to make a video about my portfolio and the things that happened. So, one of the things that I noticed when I was teaching, um, some of the best practices that I noticed was when we established a routine. So, the students came in, we did a little bell work review, um, then we did instruction, direct instruction. I gave vocabulary terms, I gave um, examples. We then did practice on the whiteboard. And the reason why I did that is so I could give them immediate feedback as to if they were getting it right or if they were getting it wrong. Also, to encourage engagement in the classroom. Um, and then we did assignments, some of them involving online grading and some of them involving worksheets where the students were given the opportunity to practice and get feedback. It was all mastery-based instruction, so my goal was proficiency on 3 specific standards. The reason why I chose to kind of focus on these is this is Hattie's, and from Hattie's you can see that giving feedback became critical to the progress of students, and there was such a encouragement to see progress and growth, and I wanted to quickly, and so um, we did a variety of complex and not complex. We did a variety of correct feedback and incorrect, and sometimes the students were given their own opportunities to try again. I tried to praise every student just for trying and for giving forth an effort on during, especially during that whiteboard portion of class instruction. So some of the contextual factors were guided notes. Yes, we did a lot of guided notes. And here's the reasoning why. Because oftentimes the concepts that I was teaching were new, and I needed them to have an opportunity to try an example in class after being given instruction that would allow them to make a connection to something that we were currently talking. And oftentimes I found that when I was doing it and guiding the questions and guiding the instruction, so many of the students were able to feel like they had a good grasp of the concept, but when they had the opportunity to really write down an example, they found that they had further questions or that they needed additional assistance. Um, Vocabulary, vocabulary, vocabulary. Some of the most important things that we did was identify the new terminology with the the math that we were doing, because I found that I was speaking in this foreign language, and as I was willing to take time to explain the meaning of the words, the students were able to feel like they understood what I was doing. Plus, I really enjoyed using an advanced vocabulary for the students, something that um, I used correct language from the beginning of the unit to the end of the unit, and I tried to not say things like the bottom number, the denominator. For slope, we identified what was happening, how the graph was moving, if it was going positive or negative. Um, so some of the prior learning that my students had. In math, there's so much that goes on prior to teaching any concept, but particularly in this unit, some of the fundamental skills that my students had were they knew the fundamental operations add, subtract, multiply, and divide for solving for an equation. And we did not do a whole lot of review on that. I would like to go back and have spent a little more time reviewing some of those fundamental operations. Also, number groups, combining like terms and identifying things like that. They needed to know how to graph a line, and that was something that most of my students were familiar with. If they were given slope intercept form of a line, they were able to go ahead and graph that line, and that became, I think, one of the key points to success when we were solving the system of linear equations via graphing. And solving an equation. Most of the students could manipulate an algebraic equation prior to this unit. So, the next thing, some of the learning goals and objectives. So, I had 3 learning goals. One, that students could solve a system of linear equations by graphing. One, that they could solve a system of linear equations by elimination. And one, that they could identify and solve a system of linear equations with substitution. My objective was that I had 75% proficiency throughout the unit, and the students that I was teaching were students that chose to be in my class. So the demographics of the class were such that the students had had me prior as a teacher and had had a good experience with me and had chosen to be in my class for instruction versus taking the online option that our school provided from another educator. I also did not have the IEP students. I did have some that had a 504 plan, but I did not have the IEP students as the school had placed them on the computer program to provide additional assistance. So it was an attainable goal to have 75% proficiency, and I felt like it was worth shooting for. So the pre-assessment involved a lot of me understanding where they were at. And as I had pointed out, things like how to graph a line, and those that were familiar with graphing a line could do so. And maybe they didn't know how to identify what the solution was. And most of them had not been exposed a whole lot to no solution or infinite solutions, or if they had, they hadn't made the connection. But the pre-assessment was pretty informal to get a great idea of where they were at. Some were proficient, I think, out of the graphing portion, but the majority not yet there. So the goal was proficiency on all 3 standards, and for the first standard, the graphing a system of linear equations, this one was by far and away the most successful. And like I said, I attribute so much of the success of this portion of the unit to the prior proficiency on graphing and the use of a calculator. Every student in my class has access to a TI-84, and we practiced, because of the ACT, the use of the TI-84, we practiced putting the equations of a line into the calculator and then using the calculator's function to give us the solution. So it actually found the ordered pair for the students. And so as long as they were capable of manipulating the equation to make sure it was in slope-intercept form so they could put it in the calculator, they were able to do that, and that was a successful part for the students. The next standard was solving a system of linear equations with elimination. And you can see on this one, they struggled a little bit more on this one. We didn't hit quite the proficiency that we were shooting for, but some of this was due to algebraic errors, and I wish I would have reiterated and practiced a little bit more with the students distributing a negative, because when we were going to subtract the first equation from the second, or the second equation from the first, what was happening is the students were not distributing the negative all the way through, and oftentimes the equation was missing one of the terms, and therefore it was skewing the results. I think they could visualize what was happening, and many of them, as we went through and used all 3 methods, there was chills in the classroom as they saw that, regardless, we were going to get this one ordered pair. This is one that they struggled a little bit with. The third one was solving a system of linear equations with substitution. Now, this one, they were pretty good about doing. They had a lot of success when the variable was given with just one solution. So for example, the equation was something like y equals negative 7x plus 2, and then maybe given the equation x equals 5. So anything linear, vertical, or horizontal, the substitution became a simple practice in algebra, and as long as they weren't making those algebraic mistakes, I, I felt like they were successful. Um, the um, the overall results were were impressive. This is just an approximation of the results, as I didn't have the actual. We did this unit far enough in advance, and I did not have access to the program that I had used when teaching it, the Mastery Connect program that identified the specific standard. But I was impressed with the teaching. One of the things that I enjoyed most was finding that the routine in the class gave the students a stability and a routine. They knew what they were looking for, and I found I will definitely do that again. Greeting the students at the door, having bell work on the board, the schedule on the board. The students went from bell work to direct instruction, to whiteboard practice, to worksheet, to a few times we had the music on and they were able to work with partners, and I'll show you an example of that later on in the video. I enjoyed giving the students positive feedback. One of the things to encourage engagement was on the whiteboard, something like draw your favorite emoji, something that everybody was able to do and was able to make sure that they were engaged and listening and with me. I didn't have more success with the males or the females per se. My high achieving students did seem to excel and go much quicker and were able to do the above proficient things very early on. As soon as they made the connection, the abstract connection between there's these two lines that exist, there's one point that's a solution to both lines, or there's these parallel lines, they will never intersect, there's no solution. Or maybe, look, we have two of the exact same line, so every single point on that line, there's an infinite number of points, there's an infinite number of solutions. So there were several challenges that I faced. One, teaching fifth period becomes difficult. It's the last class period at our school. Our school's class periods are 70 minutes. And the announcements come on at the end of the day. That posed a little bit of a problem if we weren't summarized, if we weren't to the point where the students were making all of these connections. We were interrupted with the announcements and the students were gathering their supplies. The classroom I had kind of lost interest. So I think the feedback was hugely effective. The students enjoyed getting access to their results. The test on Mastery Connect was instant when they took it. They were able to see actually a visual representation of these colors. If they were above proficient, approaching, or below proficient, they were able to see where they were at using a very visual color, and I think they enjoyed that. I think I would be able to do it better and slow down and review the few things that needed to be reviewed if I was going to do it again.